Hello. I'm just waiting on a couple more people to get in, but give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me. If everything is okay, I'm going to go on here and just make sure that everyone can hear me. It is a little, let's see here. Alrighty. Let me just make sure that everyone can hear me here. I'm just trying to make sure. Okay, perfect. So you guys can hear me. I got a couple of thumbs up here, so perfect. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm Crystal, and I'm here to talk to you guys about the impact of trauma. This is a really important topic that I love to discuss, especially in the times of COVID, especially with everything kind of going on. Here, let me just make sure that I have everything. I was actually on my Instagram, on Emily's Instagram, checking to make sure that you all could hear me and see me. So just making sure. So again, my name is Crystal, and I am a licensed social worker and counselor. I have a bachelor's degree in social work from Eastern Michigan University. And then I also have my master's degree in social work, and I got that from Wayne State University. I'm also a licensed LLMSW, or a licensed Master of Social Work. And I did my master's specialization in psychodynamic therapy. I also specialize in DBT therapy and treating CPTSD. And I have over 5 years of experience treating clients with PTSD, BPD, or borderline personality disorder, anxiety disorder, and depressive disorders as well. But I have over 10 years of experience as a social worker. I work at Meridian Health Plan. Meridian is basically an insurance company, so I take care of all of the Medicare, Medicaid, dual enrollees. So that's just a little bit about me. I also see clients. I just actually got done with seeing my last client for the day right before I came on here. And so I have over, like I said, I have over 10 years of experience doing actual therapy, but only 5 years of experience treating clients who have PTSD. So this is super important, and I'm super excited to talk to you about this subject. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Making sure everyone can still hear me, and I'm not just talking to nobody. If you are having issues with hearing me, let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I'm just kind of going to go through all of this information. I did have a PowerPoint set up here, but unfortunately, I did not know that Instagram did not allow for presentations. So I'm just going to kind of go through it based on that. But basically, I want to talk a little bit about the definition of trauma according to the DSM. So the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM-5 for short. And so with that being said, a traumatic event, or an event that involves either a death, a serious injury, or a sexual assault. There are a wide array of situations for this, but those are the 3 that are in the DSM. So the definition, of course, has expanded in the most previous years, or from the previous years. And nowadays we know that a traumatic reaction can be experienced after more indirect exposure to a traumatic event. So say, for instance, witnessing someone going through this event, or learning about a situation in which a loved one has had this event happen to them, or even having chronic exposure or witnessing a distressing event like that. So with that being said, give me one quick second here. My computer just like froze on me. So basically trauma, what's the difference basically between trauma and PTSD? So with that being said, trauma doesn't really necessarily result in PTSD. So there are really many other things that can attribute to this, right? So even if the symptoms don't add up to a diagnosis of PTSD, therefore, it's definitely not going to be beneficial for somebody to work with a therapist who works from that trauma-informed perspective and has then had additional training in trauma if you don't have the diagnosis of PTSD. So they are going to, these types of therapists like myself will be best equipped to see your symptoms in context. And then what will happen is they will be able to address your symptoms in that so a non-trauma informed therapist won't be able to do that same thing. They'll be able to give you kind of a little bit of an idea and treat the symptoms, but they won't be able to treat them from a trauma-supported view. So basically, what I kind of wanted to kind of go over with you guys is something that we call the intrusive symptoms cluster. And we call the symptoms of re-experiencing. They are basically just like internal experiences that feel as if they are keeping the memory of the actual trauma alive, and then our bodies and minds actually can lose that track of time. And as the traumatic event is not in the past, but actually in the present. So intrusive memories that are unwanted, so like thoughts, images, something like that, they can be brought up by these stimuli in the environment, right? That's something that we call triggers. So these things are different than flashbacks because you don't lose the awareness as you do when you have a flashback. So flashbacks kind of are like more described as something when you feel like the traumatic event is happening all over again. And if you catch me looking over here, it's because I'm just trying to make sure that these comments here, just making sure of who's joining and whatever. So, and making sure that I answer any questions for you guys while we are here talking about trauma tonight. So, we'll get back to it. So flashbacks. So these can be really fleeting. And so say, for instance, when you hear or smell or feel something, you're absolutely transported back to that time. And depending on the severity of the traumatic experience, you can become disoriented, maybe lose track of time. We're going to talk about disassociation episodes as well, but that's going to be a little bit later on in the trauma presentation. But basically, that's kind of what a disassociation episode is it's a series of flashbacks or physical reactivity that happens when you experience a traumatic event. And so, like we're all in COVID right now. And so we probably all have PTSD. Let's just be all honest about that from last year, the dumpster fire of 2020. And so with that being said, I don't necessarily think that all of us are having nightmares or flashbacks or, maybe intrusive memories or anything like that. But I think that with the severity of what is going on, I think a lot of people are maybe having a little bit of hypervigilance. And hypervigilance is basically constantly watching your back, constantly almost being paranoid of what's going to happen, right? Scanning or scanning the environment for threats or cues. Let's just put it that way, right? Either physically or emotionally speaking. And then as well, engaging in risky behaviors, right? I think we all have kind of done that. Whatever you believe about the pandemic or, the mask wearing or anything like that, we all kind of agree on the one thing, which is like COVID is real, and it is killing people at a very not alarming rate, I would say, but definitely at a rate where it's definitely not like the flu, right? And so with that being said, engaging in risky behavior, being maybe like going outside without wearing your mask or something to that extent, right? And so those are just some of the symptoms that I can really think of that people are doing without even knowing it. And it's kind of almost bringing our like, sorry, my boyfriend just got home. My dog is about to bark. Oh, no, she's not here. Never mind. Basically we all have, and this is what it's interesting that I'm going to talk about this right now. But we, people who experience trauma may have also difficulty with difficulty concentrating, basically, and difficulty sleeping. So they also might have some irritability, some aggression, and they have changes in their cognition, their moods. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll avoid things. So for instance, the symptoms, avoiding trauma-related thoughts and feelings, avoiding these external traumatic reminders, those types of things. And these distresses caused by the symptoms described above can also feel really overwhelming to all of us. So with that being said, now I'm going to talk about disassociation. So disassociation is basically like a mental process that can be very exaggerated during and after experiencing trauma. So when diagnosing PTSD, a lot of times therapists will also pay attention to possible symptoms of that disassociation. And the two types that serve as qualifiers for the PTSD diagnosis. So if somebody has this disassociation, then they will generally have depersonalization or derealization. And I can go into that as if you guys have any questions about that, I can definitely go about that. I'm sorry, I'm reading the comments too as well, just to make sure that I don't miss anything. I know Emily is in here, so I just wanted to make sure that I don't miss anybody's questions. But now we'll go on and talk about really like the brain and how trauma really, how the brain really experiences trauma. So think of your brain as having three main parts, right? So the brainstem is the oldest part because it developed first. So the brainstem controls the arousal and the automatic responses, aka survival, right? That's your survival type of mechanism. And so the limbic region basically evolved next. It includes the amygdala and the brain, what we call it really in the therapy world is the brain smoke detector. And of course, the hippocampus, which evolved next. And it connects the high and low parts of your brain, and it is responsible for the experience and the expression of emotion and for, of course, your memory. And then the cortex basically developed last, right? And it basically allows a person to reflect. It is basically the area that you do all of your cognition and your thinking. And the prefrontal cortex is part of the cortex involved with concentration and, of course, higher brain functioning. So it's important for these three brain areas to really work well together. It's also important for the right brain and the left brain to work together. Any real or perceived threat is registered in the primitive parts of the brain. So when your brain developed first, so the brainstem, and then the limbic region, and then the cortex, right? So all of these are really closely connected. And so any series of threats really sets off the amygdala. And this triggers that fear-based survival response of the fight or flight or freeze, right? We've all heard of that, the fight or flight or freeze. And so the hippocampus processes information about that threat. So you get a threat, and then your amygdala basically decides, okay, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to fight it? Am I going to run from it? Or am I just going to freeze? And then the hippocampus basically processes the information about that threat. And of course, then supports the amygdala by storing the memory of where and when these significant events occurred. So the hippocampus basically helps you process all of this information. It adds time and context to these memories and events that you have. So it's basically like the file cabinet of your brain. For, like just simple terms, I guess. So we can consciously like assess and process a threat or a traumatic experience after our flight or fight or freeze has been triggered. So the prefrontal cortex helps us do that. It helps us basically manage our feelings, control our impulses, and plan how we are going to respond to these things, right? And I apologize, I'm a hand person, so just so you are aware, you probably guys already know this. I'm like moving my hands and whatever. But it basically helps. So the hippocampus basically helps you make decisions, right? And so it helps us understand that cause and effect. And it helps us to solve different problems, right? So really all that I wanted to with this whole situation and this whole slide, I just wanted to let you know that our brain is connected, right? So now we're going to talk about what changes occur in the brain when you do have childhood trauma and what the effects are. So childhood trauma can really affect all of the different parts of our brain. And basically, the hippocampus actually becomes smaller and the structure is interrupted. This can, of course, affect your learning. It can affect your memory. It can affect your attention. And the corpus callosum, which basically connects the left and the right side of your brain, is also going to be reduced significantly. This actually can prevent the two sides of your brain working in such a coordinated way. Whereas changes to your amygdala can make a person react more likely to these triggers, especially, of course, the emotional side of it. And people can experience emotional extreme and struggle to regulate their emotions. This is where we see a lot of like BPD patients come across. This is where we see a lot of bipolar patients come in, and it's important as not only a therapist, but just a social worker in general to know these things, right? To know, like, when I'm diagnosing a client of mine, I am looking at all of these factors, right? I'm not just looking at, okay, well, what are they, coming in for? So say, for instance, whoever Sally is coming in because maybe her mom passed away. Okay, well, that's a very traumatic event because our moms are all important to all of us, I'm sure. And so Sally comes in and she is super upset about this. And the reason why is because her mom was like everything to her, right? And these types of traumatic events can change patterns and can change our entire habits. And that is why it's so important as a therapist to come from this point of view, a scientific point of view, because our brains control a lot of what we do, and we don't even realize it. We're really not in control of ourselves half the time. A lot of times what'll happen is the way that we kind of experience patterns and habits, or we gain patterns and habits, these are all things that are like preconceived, right? These are all things that you may have not even noticed that are affecting you. And so these things are super important to talk about. And so I'm super pumped and excited to be here. I'm going to quickly look at the comments here. All right. Well, I don't have any questions just yet, but that's okay. I'll open up the Q&A for a little bit at the end. But I wanted to really talk about what a growth and fixed mindset is, because this is super, super important, especially in people who have experienced traumatic episodes, right? So first of all, a growth, obviously, as we all probably know, it says it right in the word, growth versus fixed mindset, right? So a growth mindset would be me saying that failure is really an opportunity to just grow, or the challenges that I've been through can help me grow, or thinking that feedback is constructive, thinking, hey, I like to try new things. Whereas a fixed mindset is more towards failure is the limit of my abilities, right? Or when I'm frustrated, I just basically give up. I stick to what I know, and that's it. I don't like to, grow. I don't like to be challenged, those types of things. Or even thinking that your potential is predetermined. Those are all signs in therapy. When I'm basically, what I'm trying to say is when I am trying to diagnose a client, or trying to make sure I know which trajectory that we want to take the therapeutic process in, I am looking at all of these things. I'm not only looking at the scientific part where, your brain is connected to your whole body. Your brain kind of affects the physical part, and just everything in between. But I'm also looking at mindset. Okay, what is this person's mindset? Why, maybe they do have a growth mindset, which is great. That's a great thing to have. And that is definitely going to help us in our time together. However, if the person has a fixed mindset, I'm not just going to necessarily say, oh, well, they have a fixed mindset, can't help them because they just believe what they believe. It's just a different type of therapy that we would provide for them. And so with that being said, I think really at the core of all of this is your thoughts and your beliefs, right? So what you believe about yourself. This is how your brain connects the things that have happened to you. So your experiences with just you in general, right? Your personality, how you deal with maybe feelings or thoughts or anything, just your mental health in general, right? All of these things kind of are connected. And so when we talk about beliefs, we talk about how and where these beliefs come from. So these beliefs can come from anywhere. So the beliefs maybe can come from environment. So say you grew up in a very traumatic household where your parents always yelled at you, or maybe your parents, wanted perfection from you, right? And so you always have to match up to this perfection, this persona that you have built, right? You believe that you have to build that before you can become worthy, right? And so that's one part of where your beliefs come from. And then as well, just events that you've been through in your life, whether that be like, say, for instance, you got bullied when you were in school, or, there's so many different ways that our beliefs and our thoughts can affect us, and how we can kind of help ourselves to figure out what kind of beliefs am I having about myself? Where do they come from? What are the triggers that are kind of affecting my life? And we also want to make sure that we are living our lives to the best possible life that we can live, right? Living our best lives, right? So to summarize, we talked about trauma. And again, I have like 20 minutes, so I wish I could have gone a little bit longer, but I know I don't want to keep you guys for too long. But we talked about what trauma and PTSD is and isn't, therapeutically speaking, of course. And then we talked about the effects and the changes of child trauma on the brain. We also talked about the difference between growth and fixed mindsets and how it relates to the trauma that you've experienced in your life. And then we talked about your beliefs and your patterns and how they're formed in your brain, right? And so now I want to talk a little bit about what ITherapyGenX does. And so ITherapyGenX was a company that I creatively thought of after, so many clients of mine came to me and said, Crystal, I have never had a therapist that has taken so much time with me and really got to know me and really see me for who I am and what I've been dealing with, what I've been struggling with. And takes all of this knowledge that she has, kind of built with her whole kind of just in college and just in general, right? Just experience, real life experience. I've had trauma in my life as well, which I think helps with making sure that my clients also understand that I relate to them. I think that it's really important as a therapist to come into it with a realistic point of view, okay? I'm not the type of therapist who is going to necessarily say, okay, like do some self-care stuff and see me next week, bye. I'm really honestly wanting to, this is my passion, and I'm really wanting to, I just really want everybody to, have the relief that I found when I had a therapist that really took the time to get to know me. So I want to invite you to book your free 20-minute journey mapping call with us. We basically, on the call, we're going to discuss your current mindset, what you have been struggling with, what you are doing to currently address the situation that you're struggling with. And then as well, we're also going to briefly talk about our approach to your specific concern. Again, there's so many different, I wish I could go through all of the different concerns and different clients that I deal with on a daily basis. I have a client right now who is a recovering drug addict, and she is also a recovering kleptomaniac, and she has had a lifetime of trauma. So we, in our work together, we have kind of mapped out all of her trauma through, and this is through like 4 or 5 months of work. This isn't like, one 45-minute session and like everything is all on the table. This took months and months for us to kind of talk about and do, right? And so with that being said, I don't want you to come into the 20-minute journey mapping call if you decide to book a call with us. I don't want you to come in thinking like, okay, Crystal's just going to change my life and everything's going to be hunky-dory and like, life is just going to go my way all the time. That's not how it's going to be. But I do want to let you know that I am a supportive team member on your side, and I want to help you to achieve whatever goals that you want to achieve. And so with that being said, once you do get your free 20-minute journey mapping call done with either me or one of my one of my employees, I'm sorry, I'm like, woo, this has been a long day. I just got off the phone with one of my clients, so I had to like kind of get into the mode of that. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a general outline of your recommended steps and processes that we can help you kind of achieve.